Welcome to the Miami-Dade College Journalism Speaker Series. I'm your host, Manolo Barco. Joining us today is veteran Miami Herald reporter Rene Rodriguez. Rene has covered film for the Miami Herald. He's been in the features department and has also done obits, crimes. He's done pretty much everything that you can at the Herald. Rene, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I want to start off by talking a little bit about young journalists. What kind of advice, you started off writing crime briefs and writing obits. What kind of advice would you give to them so they can get their feet wet and kind of get started?
I would say two things. I would say, first of all, you need to be writing all the time. I started writing short fiction for myself when I was about 8 years old, just because I really enjoyed writing. The writing is like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And it's key to whatever kind of journalism you want to do, whether it's online, whether it's video, whether it's whatever form you want to do in documentary style, there's always a written component to it. And I think it's the single most important element of journalism, because it's something you have to be good at. If you're not a good writer, if you can't write clearly, that's it. You're not going to progress any further. And then the other thing I would recommend is to pick an area or a subject matter or a field that interests you and kind of become an expert at it. Whether it's the Miami Heat, whether it's real estate, banking, whatever it is. But you want to be able to have a knowledge of a field so you can write about it authoritatively. And when you're reporting a story, you know who you're going to call. I was interested in movies from a very early age, and so for me it was movies. That was the field that, by the time I started writing movie reviews at the Herald, I felt very confident in doing it because I felt like I knew what I was talking about, and I could hold my own, with anybody. I started doing it when I was very young, but I felt like I could hold my own with whoever challenges my opinion, and I was also a good writer, for my age, I had a lot of practice. So those are the two things I would say. Writing is key. You write a lot. Keep a journal, keep a blog, and then also specialize in fields that interest you.
So I'd like to ask our guests, because a lot of times our students they're afraid. They're afraid of messing up. And I'm sure there are times when your career, when you first started, there are times and things that you did that you made a mistake. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of those mistakes? That kind of puts our students at ease to kind of see some of that.
Yeah, mistakes are inevitable. We're human. Look, I reviewed a movie one time called Hard Boiled by John Woo. And I said that the movie takes place in Tokyo, the capital of Hong Kong. And that made it into the paper. That's a really embarrassing mistake, especially as I was saying, right now, you have to exude an air of confidence, and we had to run a correction in the paper the next day that said, actually, Tokyo is in Japan. It's not in Hong Kong. So, mistakes are inevitable. And the thing about mistakes, especially when it comes to journalism, everybody makes them. We've seen that a lot in the last year. With CNN, you've seen a lot of these big mistakes that have been made. The important thing about journalism is you correct them, you own up to them, and you move on. Being afraid of messing up, or being afraid of writing the wrong thing, or being afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, those things should never be a deterrent in terms of journalism. And nothing is permanent. You're not writing a document that's going to go into law. Right now, the tax reform bill that the Trump administration passed, they're realizing now it has a bunch of mistakes in it that they're going to have to go back and fix. So a hesitancy because of making an error should never stop you.
A good portion, Rene, of your career was as a film critic for the Miami Herald. Talk to us a little bit about when you first started that. What was the genesis of that? How did that come about? And I understand it also includes a pretty cool story with Bill Cosford, the legendary Bill Cosford.
Yeah, so I was a movie fan from a very early age, and the first thing that I started reading in newspapers were movie reviews. Bill Cosford was the movie critic at the Miami Herald. Now, this is back in the 70s, right? So I'm growing up, and I would literally just get the Friday paper. Well, my parents subscribed, but I would look at the Friday section which is where all the ads for the movies came out and all the reviews were in, and the Sunday section, which was entertainment. And Bill Cosford was the critic. So, you know, like you don't know any better. Oh, this guy's writing about movies in a newspaper. I must have been like 10 or 11 years old. And I'm like, wow, you know. And so I would read a lot of these things, and a lot of these things would go over my head. But so this is before the era. Obviously, there's no online. There's no way to reach out to these people. You can't communicate with them. They're just these mysterious people that you read about. So I sent him a letter in the mail. I just sent him a letter that said, you know, hey, I really love your movie reviews, and it was kind of like a letter where it's like, I want to be your friend, you know, like just so we can correspond. And he wrote me back. You know, one day I got a letter in the mailbox from Bill Cosford, and it was like I never forgot it, because I was like, wow, like this guy actually took the time to read my letter and wrote me back. It kind of humanized him in a way, and he was just like, you know, thank you for your kind words. You know, I would love to correspond with you, time permitting, on both sides. Today, that's really easy to do. You can email somebody, you know, and you'll be surprised at how responsive reporters can be. But that moment for me was very, very important, because he was kind of like this abstract person that was doing something that I thought was amazing, writing about movies in a newspaper, and he took the time to write me a letter. So many, many years later, when I started working under him, I told him that story, and he was very embarrassed. He didn't remember doing it.
Wow, so you went from the point of like being a fan to actually working alongside this.
Yeah, and it was, you know, it was pretty amazing, because Cosford was a mentor type. He was very interested in bringing up new writers. I think most journalists, you'll find, are very eager to help young journalists who are trying to figure things out, because it's a great profession to be in. You know, it's a very besieged profession. There's a lot that's happening in journalism right now that is difficult, but it's something that people feel in their blood, and by nature, a lot of the journalists that I know tend to be mentors. So yeah, the first day I met Cosford, actually the very first time I met Cosford was, I used to work at a movie theater selling popcorn. That was one of my first jobs while I was in high school, and he came in on a Tuesday night, and I recognized him from his photo in the paper.
That's pretty cool.
And so I said, "You're Bill Cosford, right?" And he was kind of like freaked out. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, the photo in the paper." I'm like, "Yeah." And I gave him popcorn and Coke, and I was like, on the house.
All right, well, we're going to take a momentary break, and we'll return. We'll return with Rene Rodriguez.
Start your story at MDC. Be analytical. Be imaginative. Be a rising star. Be bold. Be connected. Be the solution. Be ready. What's your story? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Welcome back. We have Rene Rodriguez here from the Miami Herald. Before we took the break, Rene, you were talking about your encounter with Bill Cosford at the movie theater. That's pretty interesting stuff. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we made that, you know, it was just that passing thing, but for me, I felt like I met a celebrity. So years later, fast forward like 10 years later, and I start working at the Herald, and, you know, from the very first interview that I did at the Miami Herald, I told them, they asked you, this is a company where you can pretty much do anything. There's so many different avenues. Back then for newspapers, there's advertising sales, there's all kinds of things. You know, what is your dream job? And I told them movie critic. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. And I got to meet Bill Cosford. He took me out to lunch at Joe's Stone Crabs. Oh, wow. And I could tell that he was kind of sizing me up to see, because I wanted to do backup movie reviews. Backup movie reviewer is the guy who does the Friday the 13th sequels, you know, and all the junky movies that the main critic's not going to waste their time with. but I knew he was it was kind of like an informal like evaluation. I know he was testing me because he would ask me things like, so what's your favorite Woody Allen movie? And I ordered steak, and he's like, why are you ordering steaks at a Stone Crabs? You know, and I said, because I don't like Stone Crabs. And he respected the fact that it was my opinion. But you know, it was great. So he was teaching a graduate course at that time at UM. He let me audit the course. And he was always incredibly supportive of my work. When he interviewed, I remember when he interviewed Steven Spielberg for Schindler's List, and you know, I asked him how was it, and he was like, he was amazing. Someday you're gonna get to do it, and he was right.
Well, that's pretty cool. So I imagine that people think because you've interviewed a lot of famous people in your time, they feel that you could just pick up your phone and call anybody, right? I'm sure your family members just say, hey, can you talk to, you know, Javier Bardem or whoever it is that you want to talk to. Talk to me about some of those Christmas dinners or Thanksgiving dinners in your family. Hey, your aunt or your grandmother trying to get you to call someone famous.
Well, you know, there's never been a situation like that. There have been a couple of situations where my friends have embarrassed me. For example, when there's something about Mary was shooting in Miami,
yeah.
Cameron Diaz and Matt Dillon and Ben Stiller would go out a lot on the town. And one Saturday night, I get a call. I wasn't home, but when I got home, I had the answering machine. And some of my friends had gone to some salsa bar on 8th Street. And they were there. Cameron Diaz and Matt Dillon were just there, just kind of hanging out. And my friend literally called me. He's like, hey, there's people here who want to say hi to you. And they put them on the phone. And you could tell by their voices they were very awkward. But no, like to answer your question, like, no, I don't have famous people's phone numbers on my cell. I have a couple of people who I know just from having worked with, from having interviewed them over the years. But no, usually those interviews are set up through studios. So it's not like, you know, I can call Steven Spielberg and be like,
hey,
yo, Steven, what's up? You know? And my family has never been impressed with what I do because I was always talking about movies from an early age. So, you know, like my sisters don't, like, they're just like, big deal. You know, like, oh, you watch movies for a living, poor baby, you know. So there was never any kind of, like that kind of thing.
So they've kept you grounded.
Yes, yes.
So talk to us, you worked you were based in New York for the Herald from 99 to 2008, correct?
Yeah, what happened is in 1999, I was 31 and I had always wanted to live in New York. And so I said, you know, let me see if I'm marketable, because I'd spent my career at the Herald. I'd started working at the Herald when I was 20. And so I said, let me see if, you know, and New York was the place that I wanted to live. So it wasn't that I wanted to leave the Herald, it's that I just wanted to live in New York. And so I sent out my resume and I got a lot of responses. And so basically I got a job offer. I had a couple of job offers, but the one that I liked the most was for Entertainment Weekly. And I told the Herald, it's like, look, I'm going to take this job, not because I want to leave the Herald, but because I want to live in New York. And I want to live in New York before I get any older. And so I had a exit date. I mean, everything was set. Entertainment Weekly was getting ready to. And then the Herald came back to me and said, what if we let you work out of New York? Because you're still going to be covering movies. So it was a win-win. I got to live in New York, but I didn't have to go into an office, and I didn't have to give up my job covering about movies. And when I got tired of living in New York, I moved back to Miami, and I wouldn't have to change that job. So yeah, so I lived up there for 10 years, and it was fantastic.
Talk to us about this movie scene here in Miami. Obviously, moonlighting, everyone knows about moonlighting. One of our former students, Mark Pulaski, just shot a movie here at Huracan. So talk to us a little bit about the vibrancy. I know there's some, talk about the movies are going elsewhere. So what do you see as the future?
Like filmmaking in Miami is an ebb and flow thing. So I remember, Scarface, which was shot here when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really famous one, because they were driven out of town. Then Miami Vice came in the mid '80s, and Miami blew up all of a sudden. If you go back on IMDb and you start looking at all the films that were shot here, I mean, True Lies with James Cameron, that scene where they're blowing up the skyscraper in Brickell, Bad Boys. I mean, there was a huge number of movies. Right now, we're in a kind of a down period because the tax incentives went away. Filmmaking has gotten so expensive, and the kind of mid-budget $40 to $50 million movie that used to get made, they just don't get made anymore. Everything that gets made is Marvel movies, Star Wars movies, and those films all shoot in Atlanta because Atlanta has one of the most generous tax incentive programs in the country. So right now we're kind of on an ebb in terms of filmmaking here, but you do see filmmakers like Jenkins, who grew up here and came back here to shoot Moonlight. We had the Florida Project, which was shot in Orlando last year and won a bunch of awards. So you're seeing a kind of resurgence of an indie film scene, which are low-budget movies made by people who either are from here or want to film here. Harmony Korine, the director of Spring Breakers, is right now editing a movie called The Beach Bum that he shot here with Matthew McConaughey, Zac Efron, and I saw a scene that he edited when he was editing it, and it's shot right in the middle of Biscayne Bay with Miami downtown skyline in the background, and Jimmy Buffett and Snoop Dogg are on a boat collaborating on a rap song. It looks like the craziest movie, but it was shot for a small budget. So I think because the cost of filmmaking today has gone down, because you can make movies on your iPhone conceivably, and because you have places like this where students are so familiar and so savvy with technology right now, there is a hope that there's going to be a new independent film scene. There's just people going out and making their movies, and if they're good enough, they could cross over into the national.
Well, we're going to take another break, and we will return with Rene Rodriguez.
Start your story at MDC. Be analytical. Be imaginative. Be a rising star. Be bold. Be connected. Be the solution. Be ready. What's your story? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Welcome back. We have Rene Rodriguez from the Miami Herald with us today. Rene, so you transitioned now recently from being a film critic to doing real estate. A lot of people would say, how does that happen? I know that you have a lot of training in the past. You were a features writer. You did the film critic stuff. You did crime briefs, obits. Did a lot of that prepare you for what you do today?
Yeah, before you become a movie critic, you have to be a reporter. You have to prove your chops. So a movie critic job isn't a job that you can just parachute into. Unfortunately, movie critic jobs are really no longer sustainable the way that they used to. That used to be a career. You could actually go to school and be like, you know what, I want to be a movie critic, and I'm going to work for a publication that's going to pay me full time to write about movies. Those jobs are no longer tenable, and you see it in newspapers across the country. The Miami Herald did the best that they could to maintain their film coverage, but there comes a point where you have to make a financial business decision. And so what they did is okay, we're eliminating this position, but we have these other positions available, and we really want you to stay, and we would like you to consider them. And so I chose real estate for a number of reasons. One is I didn't know anything about it, and I felt it would be really interesting to educate myself in it. Two, in Miami, real estate housing affordability is a huge issue. And so I felt like I would be able to find interesting stories there. And then three, it required me to learn a new set of reporting skills. I've never been much of a business reporter, but that's one of the great things about journalism is you're constantly learning new things. And you get put in these beats, and you have editors who work with you, and you develop sources. It's just like any other beat. But I've been doing that for it'll be a year now in April, and it's not. I mean, I miss writing about movies, but this is actually very interesting work, and people read it. I mean, it sounds dry and boring, but it's any beat. You can do anything with any beat. It all depends on how you approach it and how you choose to report it and how you write about it.
You've been able to humanize it. Talk to us about some of the stories that you've written on the beat.
Yeah, well, like, for example, when people think of Miami real estate, you think of like luxury condos. You think of all the towers that are going up here, in downtown Miami, and they're priced at like $5, $6, $7, $8 million. I mean, like those things, like for the average person, doesn't care about those things. One of the stories that I did that really resonated with readers is I took a look at renters, because there's a huge number of renters in Miami. They tend to be two categories. They tend to be, a lot of them are young professionals who are starting out, so they don't have the money to put on a down payment. They want to live in Brickell, or they want to live, like near downtown area. They want to live in the popular neighborhoods. And then there's a lot of people who have empty nesters who sell their homes and rent. They make a nice profit on their property and they rent. So the trick is to just get voices in there. I just did a story last week about a developer who bought an old condo building in Brickell. It was built in the 1970s, and he bought everybody out, and he's going to build this new luxury tower. And the way that I reported that story was I found one of the people who used to live in the building, and I got him to talk to me, and I told him, well, how much did you buy this condo for? He's like, well, me and my wife and my 3 kids had bought it in October for $500,000. 6 months later, the developer comes and says, I'll pay you $1.1 million for it.
Oh, wow.
So see, that's an interesting story right there. So by starting with that, and this is a real person. This isn't.
Yeah.
So by starting with that, you grab the reader's attention, and then you can go into the subject of condo termination. What does this mean for the city? How it impacts the tax base? Because real estate affects all of us. So that's what I've been trying to do is trying to make it consumer friendly, meaning to appeal to a general audience.
You also were a big part of the coverage in the shooting that happened in Parkland. Talk to us how do you even start with something like that? You're talking to people at a very, very tragic time.
It's very difficult, and it's one of the things that the Herald does best is respond to live breaking news. The Pulse shooter, the Hollywood, the shooting at the Fort Lauderdale airport, Hurricane Irma. With Parkland, at first there's this period where you're just as stunned as everyone else. Like you can't believe it. And while the event is actually happening, there's very little information. So, we're watching TV just like everybody else because we're just trying to figure out, what's going on. It's really the next day when you come into the office. So I came into the office, the shooting was on February 14th. I came into the office on February 15th. I came in like at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so my assignment was, we need to find who the victims are. And they hadn't; those names had not been released by the Broward Sheriff's Office. And so yes, it is painful work. You start scouring social media. You start reaching out to people because you want to confirm this. You can't just say this person was killed in the shooting if it's not true. You have to make sure that you have these names right, because people are going to be reading this, and a lot of people are going to be finding out about the death of a friend or a relative through what you're writing. So it's very difficult work, and it takes an emotional toll as well. But at the same time, you feel like you're doing something. You're doing something about this. You're providing people with information. You're doing justice to the people who were murdered. You're giving their families a voice, which is very important. So it's like that's, different people cover different aspects of the shooting. Like, our police reporters were focusing on the shooter, focusing on how the Broward Sheriff's Office, responded. So it's a team effort. It becomes a team effort, but it's very satisfying, and I think it's also very important. People really, really appreciate that kind of information.
So you alluded to the digital newsroom. Talk to us a little bit about the future. Where do you see the future of print journalism or newspapers?
That's the $1 million question. The concept of a newspaper, what a newspaper is, which was delivered to your front door every morning. You would open it and you would find out what's going on in the world after waking up. That concept is completely outdated. It doesn't. Right now, we live in a 24/7 live. We find out about things the moment they happen, the moment somebody says something. You don't need a newspaper to tell you what President Trump is saying. At the same time, the newspaper industry, and not just newspapers, but magazines, television station networks, they were built on that business model, which was advertising is what paid the salaries of reporters to be able to go out and gather these news. Once that advertising disappears, there's literally, the business model doesn't hold. You know, people are, you know, the print product is still profitable. It still makes money. Otherwise, you would see it go away. But if you were to ask me, you know, do I think 5 years from now there's going to be a print edition of newspapers the way there is now? I don't know. I don't think so.
Thank you, Rene. It was great having you on our show today. And until next time, we'll see you. Thanks for joining us today.